Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, A Pandemic Push to Modernize Museum Collaboration with Microsoft 365. I'd like to take a quick moment to do some housekeeping. Please use the Q&A panel to ask any and all questions you might have. We would love to answer them, and we'll do so at the end of the webinar. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce today's panelists. We have Catherine Devine, the Business Strategy Leader for Libraries and Museums, Microsoft Worldwide Education. We have Richard Scott, the Director of Information Technology at the Detroit Institute of Arts. We have Ryan Charnock, our Senior Collaboration Consultant here at Red Level, as well as Clay Osborne, our Senior Development Consultant here at Red Level. Now, we do have quite a few topics that we're going to be going through in a discussion style format. We've got some information on touchless response stations, queue management apps, and Microsoft 365 adoption roadmaps. So without further ado, Catherine, would you like to take it away?
Yes, great. Thanks so much, Megan. And thank you for the opportunity. I hope you're all up nice and early this morning. I'm really excited today to collaborate with Red Level and Detroit Institute of Arts. They've both done some amazing work in this space in response to the pandemic, and I think you're going to really enjoy what we have to show today. So let's jump in by talking about touchless response stations. And my first question was, what is a touchless response station? So let's go with Richard Scott. Richard.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, so let's start just with response station in general first. We've had response stations at the DIA for quite some time. They allow visitors to respond to a thought-provoking question related to the art in a specific area or exhibition at the museum. Then when we had them up pre-pandemic, responses were gathered on a card or a sheet of paper that was provided along with, a pencil or pen. Responses then were periodically gathered, and then some were curated, and then some were rotated on display near the response stations in the galleries. So that's what pre-pandemic, that's what a response station looked like. So, when the pandemic hit and, we were all out of the museum for a while, knowing that we would come back eventually, we started thinking about, what can we do to bring these response stations up? We really wanted to keep the concept of response stations, but we obviously couldn't have the touch component. So we started to imagine what that would look like. And we needed the digital response stations to mimic as much as possible, the experiences that we'd originally envisioned. And, we needed to gather responses, curate them, and then display, selected responses in the galleries. So what we came up with, and we worked with Red Level on, was we have the same prompting questions displayed in the gallery, but we added some instructions for how to respond. Visitors can respond by scanning a QR code, for example, that will take on their smartphone, which will take them to a Microsoft form that restates the question and then allows them to submit their answer. They could also get to a form that does the same thing using a tiny URL in the browser on their phone, or they can text their response directly to a specified phone number that we have near the prompt. And then Red Level created a process that pulls all those responses together, from the various different channels into a SharePoint list, along with some descriptive information, like what channel it came from and what date and time it was submitted. Then the process kicks off an approval workflow that sends an email to a specific email group once a week, letting them know that they have responses to review. And then that contains a link to the list that the users would approve for display, and also allow them to select which approved responses are displayed. Then the approved responses are displayed via an HTML page that was designed by the DIA and built by Red Level, and is hosted on an Azure web service. The page is displayed on a monitor in the gallery, and each response station has a different design, but it's thematic to the area that the response station is in, and that monitor then displays that HTML page and cycles through all of the approved responses that were marked for display. So that's basically what a digital response station is.
Yeah, I really love how that was, pulling together lots of different, Microsoft services and bringing them together to create something that was needed at the time. And we really love. Obviously we love the Detroit Institute of Art. We really love Red Level, who is a great Microsoft partner, who can be innovative in this space to sort of bring that. So can you talk a little bit more about sort of how did people respond to this idea of using QR codes and this kind of a technology? Did it achieve what you wanted it to achieve?
Yeah, it has. I mean, we were concerned that some of our visitors wouldn't be familiar with a QR code, nor a tiny URL for that matter. So we were insistent that we use text message method as well to try to simplify. Okay. But it's interesting, you learn things over time. Since we went live with these, which was the first one, I think went up maybe in November, if I'm not mistaken. At any rate, since we've been live, we've only gotten one text message response.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but we've gotten, I had some statistics, and this is a little bit dated statistics. We've gotten a total of 53 responses. Most of them have been QR code responses, but a fair amount with a tiny URL as well. But yeah, only one response via text. So, we wanted to make it easy for people to use, and people are using it. We're under a limited capacity right now at the museum. We're only allowing 50 people into the museum every half hour. So we don't have anywhere near the number of visitors that we typically have. So while 53 responses might on the surface sound low, it's really not, given the small amount of visitors that we allow through the museum.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I'm sure that it has, well, maybe I'm being presumptuous here. Do you plan to keep using this kind of thing, post when we all come back to normal?
Absolutely.
I assume we will at some point.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I had a discussion with our exhibitions team just last week, trying to understand what it would look like to expand these to other locations. That is, we have 2 response stations, digital response stations up and running now, and we just, we're talking about, what it would take to continue this in various other locations. So absolutely, I think this will end up being the way we handle response stations going forward, period. And people are engaging with it, and the responses we're getting are great.
Yeah.
So it certainly hasn't diminished the quality of responses. People aren't abusing it or anything like that, and so far it's been at least as good as we expected, if not better, actually.
That's really great. And I love how a crisis sort of, COVID causes us to think differently, but it has applications even beyond that crisis. I'm sure it has other sorts of benefits as well, particularly around maintenance and cleaning and all sorts of things like that. But it also speaks to, I think, the something that we talk about a lot, which is, people's experiences are rooted in the real world. And as we've all seen, there's definitely, this has been the renaissance of QR codes. People know how to do them now. People go to restaurants and expect to have a QR code. and know how to use it, right? So that really helps with the adoption, I think, as well. It's not a new way. Can you speak a little bit to that? Is that your experience?
Absolutely, yeah. So as you mentioned, I mean, almost everywhere you go, if you are going out, to some place like a restaurant or anything like that, you see QR codes now. And we use them now for other things as well. Early on, there was some hesitation around whether or not people would actually understand how to use them. And there was concerns about, not everybody has what, we considered a modern smartphone, right? So, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, generally any phone that someone might have that was new in the past, 3 or 4 years would be able to scan a QR code, right? So, and clearly, people, we don't get any complaints about the QR codes. It's not like because we do have surveys and whatnot that we contact visitors and we ask them for their experience, what they thought about their experience at the DIA, and it's quite a lot of questions, and a lot of them are open-ended. But no one complains about scanning a QR code. So I think that people have been forced into a position where they had to learn to use QR codes, right?
Yeah.
Under the circumstance, and not just at the DIA, but just in life in general.
Just in life, yeah. Can you speak a little bit to how you came up with this? And we've talked a little bit about how you've developed it and what it does, but talk a little. I'm really interested in this like innovation culture sort of idea. How did the Detroit Institute of Art sort of like come to this was a solution? What was that process looking like?
So early on, there was it started with just a discussion of how could we offer a response station in a touchless way. That was just a simple statement. So then there was a few of us, myself, my IT manager, and a couple of people from our interpretation department, just started kind of talking it through how that might look, how that might work. So we had some general idea of how we would like it to work, and then we brought Red Level in to help us kind of flesh out from an architecture and code perspective, how can we leverage the tools that we already have to deliver something like this. And it, so it was just a collaborative process that we went through, and we settled on the mechanism that, that I described.
Yeah.
Clay can speak a little bit more about the actual architecture that this uses, but as far as the concept and the building of the concept, it was really a collaborative effort between my team and our interpretive planning team at the DIA.
Yeah. No, it's great. I love the idea, and I think it presents with so many benefits on top of the obvious ones, right? Of clearly in a COVID environment, we can't have people touching things, so that's not a problem that every museum is trying to solve for. And but I think it also gives you lots of potentially data points and other kinds of insights that you wouldn't otherwise. And it potentially scales as well, right?
To the absolutely. Yeah, and it's important that we try to interact with visitors at the museum to the extent that we can, even though we can't do touch things. We want to try to have some interactivity, and this was an opportunity to do that. A number of other things at the DIA, we had required touch, and we're working on those as well, coming up with touchless ways to, I'll give you an example, and it's not part of this presentation, but what about gesture control? So we're working with that right now. We're not working with it. We're conceiving of how we would use gesture control to start, for example, a video in the gallery, or to, if you have a digital book, use a motion like this to turn the page in a book, right? So all of this is about trying to continue to create interactive experiences with our visitors, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that's actually a really excellent point, Richard, which is these idea of like, how do we get an interaction that people just intuitively know how to use, has always been this challenge in technology, right? We're way back at the beginning, you used to have to go on 1-week training courses to learn any sort of application. We clearly don't want that in a museum experience. We want to get much more to, what feels like a natural thing. But, I know that, and maybe not as much so now, but certainly early on, there was always this challenge about latency in a touch screen, and whether or not, people could get the response quick enough, and whether they knew what to do, etc. Whereas gestures feel very much more natural. And I think we'll get to, a little like QR codes. It just works now. It didn't used to. And now it's just literally your camera, whereas before it was like you had to have a certain app and all this. So I think removing this friction from the experience is also what we talk about a lot, which is removing technology from the experience and having things just work, so that people are less aware of the technology.
You definitely don't want technology to be a barrier.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No. I was just going to say. So we actually we bought an Azure Connect device, and we haven't had an opportunity to ask our partners at Red Level to work on that just yet, because there's been other projects that have been a higher priority. But we've been conceiving of how we might be able to use, as I said, the Azure Connect, for example, to communicate as an input device to control, what's happening on a screen, right? So we're very hopeful that that'll work out well.
Yeah. Well, in the interest of time, this is great. Let's move on to our second topic, which is around queue management. Another thing that resulted from a need presented by the pandemic, but potentially has applications into the future. So maybe we could sort of start with a little bit more sort of detail about what this queue management app is, and what problem was it trying to solve?
Sure. So we have exhibitions at the DIA like most museums do, and both free or paid, depending. And then when we have limited attendance, as I said, currently, to ensure social distancing in the museum. So we opened a large exhibition recently called Detroit Style. It's excellent. So my little plug, people should come down and check it out. It's car design, and it's really a wonderful exhibition. But we expected the attendance would be pretty high. It's free, and even though we have limited attendance, we figured that most people who are coming in the door are going to want to go through the exhibition. And of course, the exhibition is a smaller space. You're not talking about the entire museum. You're talking about a smaller space, and we're concerned about obviously social distancing in there, so that we need to limit the amount of people that are in that space at a given time. And we were also concerned about having a line. So in past large exhibitions, we had a Star Wars exhibition like 3 years ago, that even we had time ticketing for the exhibition itself, but we still had so much interest that we ended up having switchbacks of people in line to enter the actual exhibition itself. So one thing we didn't want now especially is a long line or queue of people waiting outside the exhibition to get in. So we wanted to come up with a way that people could virtually stand in line. So what we came up with, and from a requirement standpoint, initially, some of the requirements anyway were easy. It had to be something that was easy to register for, right? So all visitors could do it easily, or staff could help a visitor do it, on like the staff being on an iPad or whatever have you, be able to register on behalf of the visitor if they needed some help with it or whatever have you. So easy to register, easy to manage for the staff that are at the exhibition. So we have someone at the entrance of the exhibition and the exit of the exhibition typically, and we needed it easy for them to manage, right? So again, something like iPad or iPad mini, something, and super simple. We needed to be able to notify visitors when to come to the exhibition entrance. We wanted to be able to know how many people were in the exhibition at any given time. We wanted to be able to use it for multiple exhibitions because we have more than one going typically at a given time. And then, be accessible by staff at multiple locations, right? So those were the basic simple requirements. So we created a requirements document, and so ultimately Red Level built an app that's hosted on Azure. And I'm going to walk through this. We may have to talk about it a little bit because it can get, talking about it doesn't really demonstrate the simplicity of the solution, right? But so to register, you can scan a QR code again, which will take them to a form in the web app where they can enter their name, cell phone number, and the number of people in their party, right? Same thing, they can do that same thing with a tiny URL, or they can text the word register to a specified phone number. They'll get if they do that, they'll get a list of exhibitions back, right? And the exhibitions have a number by them. And then they reply with the number associated with the exhibition, their name, and the number in their party to register. And regardless of how they sign up, they'll get a confirmation on their cell phone that they've entered the line for the exhibition, and they'll be told how much time they have until it's time for them to enter. So then over time, let's say it's an hour until their entry time. They'll get reminders at periodic times, and then 15 minutes out from their time to enter, we'll send them a message and encourage them to come to the exhibition entrance. Then once at the entrance, our guest services staff can admit people by simply selecting the person with the name, saying Scott, party of 4, right, and admit them with a single touch of a button, right, and that immediately increases a display that they have on their iPad, in this case iPad minis they're using, that shows them how many people are in the exhibition at a given time. And instantly at the other end, at the exit of the exhibition, the person there also sees the number change, right? And then the person at the exit, will detract from the total number of the exhibition as people are exiting, right? So it's really quite simple. There's other functionality too. Visitors can say, well, they're enjoying, they can walk around the museum, obviously. They're not really in line, like standing in line. They're walking around enjoying the museum, and we'll let them know when they need to head over. And if they're enjoying some area of the museum and they don't want to enter the exhibition yet, they can also text the word delay, and that'll move them further back in line so that they can attend later. But all in all, it's a very simple app to use.
And simple is key, right? So I love that. I think when we first talked about this, I was like, the applications for this are great because, when you think about it, timed entry is kind of an artificial constraint. It's a way of managing capacity. And if we were looking for a better visitor experience, and if we're looking for a better way to utilize capacity, particularly under constrained circumstances of COVID, then this is a better way to manage capacity potentially. Has that been your experience? And I think we have a demo, right? Are we?
Yep. Clay's going to be able to demo it for us, and we're just getting started with this now, Catherine. So, the jury is out, but sure. All indications are this is going to dramatically help us, and quite frankly, the staff are excited to have this in place well into the future. Post-pandemic, this is going to be used. I mean, I explained the Star Wars situation to you. Had we had this in place, you know, we wouldn't have had all those switchbacks and lines. I mean, we had a line out of that thing all the way down the you know, this hallway in the museum all the way back to Rivera Court, which was, you know, the museum is large, but the line was ridiculous. So we could have avoided a lot of that. So we're anxious to use this even post-pandemic.
Yeah.
But I mean, why don't we let Clay, if you can, if you want to demo for us how it works a little bit.
All right, so I will take over the presentation. Let me know if you can see my screen, guys. So the queue management app, as explained, you know, we can register via the web. The DIA employees can manage at the door. We get SMS reminders, and we can register via SMS. So there's a lot there that it can do. Then I'm going to show you the actual app itself. So when someone hits with a tiny URL, they see this page. Now this is responsive, so it'll shrink down depending on, you know, their device, their phone, and they basically get the listing of the exhibitions that are available right now. So in this environment here, I've got 2. They can click on this to expand it, and they can see the approximate wait time, and they can submit their name, their number, and the size of their party. And that's, you know, for either one of these. And of course, this is expandable, so they can add more exhibitions, and, you know, just, you know, kind of pile them in here and enable, disable. However, it's very flexible for the DIA. So a user would come in here and say, I'm going to register and send in a party of 4. I'm going to enter the line. We get a nice little thank you. And then after that, a text would, you know, come to their phone. There it was. Welcoming to the exhibition, giving me some instructions, you know, reminding me of, you know, other commands that can, you know, you can take place. You know, you can interact with the system through SMS and get a status at any time. Those reminders are going to come in. Like if you're 3 hours out, you're going to get a reminder at the 3-hour mark, at the 2-hour mark, at the 1-hour mark, the half-hour mark, and then of course 15 minutes. It's going to instruct you to head on to the exhibition and get in line. And at that point, someone standing in line or someone at the door will also have this website on an iPad, except they will be signed in. So this is integrated with Azure AD. So it's hosted in Azure, and it's utilizing credentials for the DIA's tenant in Azure. So I can log in to this, and then we'll see an authenticated version of this app, which just gives us the ability to manage and administrate. So administration wise, you know, we can add more exhibitions and set some, you know, parameters, maximum capacity, all that kind of stuff. And then the people at the entrance and exit see this view where they can pick the exhibition they're manning. And here's the queue. Here I am, last in line. I just entered the queue. There were a couple people in front of me, and both the person at the entrance and exit see this same view. So if I decide to open this in a new window, if I'm going to duplicate this, and let's say I'm going to put these side by side, so we get a view kind of what the entrance and exit folks see. It's a real-time view, basically, of who's inside the exhibition at that time. So the person at the entrance sees the next person in line. Joe, is that you? Yep. Okay, I'm going to enter you into the exhibition. They have one guest. They go in, and the occupancy ticks up a number on both screens at the same time. So they are on separate devices, someone at the exit, someone at the entrance. And, you know, this is utilizing a technology called SignalR. So it's real time. If I decide, oh, they had less participants or more participants, and I'm going to allow them access into the exhibition, I can +++ and add those people or subtract people from the exhibition. And the guy at the other end of the door sees it real time, who's inside at that any given time, how many people are inside, so they know not to admit more when we're getting close to capacity. There's also a little spacing interval here, timer, that will go off once you add somebody, because once you add somebody and let them in, You need to allow them some time to get in and spread out. So we have like a 5-minute interval where the person at the door has to wait till this timer goes down before admitting the next person in line. So we have these big plus and minuses here in case, just to handle exceptions, that kind of thing. But mostly we're driven off of the queue. And this is the queue that, reminders, SMS reminders get sent to and such. And of course, we can have the power here. The person at the door has the power to knock somebody out of line. And then that happens real time on both sides. They can reorder and send somebody up and down the line, or bring somebody forward. So they have total power over the queue. Mm-hmm. And letting people in and letting them out. And the guy at the exit, when someone exits the exhibition, he simply, okay, 3 people left. And the guy at the door sees that number go down instantly and knows we're clear to let somebody else in if we're at capacity. So if we're at capacity, we start to get some warnings here. We get, the numbers go yellow, we're close. And then, we're red, we're very close to capacity, kind of be mindful of who's going in here a lot, closer. And then, of course, we don't want everyone to go over capacity, but that's the goal here. So it's basically how simple this is to use.
And on the visitor side, it's very simple too. I know it's very difficult to demo what the cell phone looks like, but it really is quite simple. It's like anything else that people have done on their cell phone. You get a little message and gives you some options, yep. And explains to you how the process will work. So
I could show that a little bit, just basically through slides. So when someone submits, they say register. They get a text message back immediately saying you can register for the following exhibitions, and we have the numbers and the actual exhibitions here. So these are actually screenshots right from my phone. So this was a conversation I had with the SMS number. And I can then at that point text in my number. I want to join Russ Marshall, for example. I text a 2 and immediately it kicks back and lets me know, okay, what's the name of your party? And I, then at that point I supply my name. It kicks back how many individuals are in your party. I say 4. And then we get back, a welcome message. You've successfully entered the line. Your estimated wait is currently 5 minutes. At this time, of course, since it's under 15 minutes, it immediately says to proceed to the end, to proceed to the line. But typically, when your estimate is more, then it's going to say something different. It'll say, we'll send you reminders, and then let you know when it's time to go. And you get this help message, which is, you can type exit to be removed from the line completely. You can delay if you're not able to make your reservation, would like to move yourself approximately 15 minutes back in line. And then you can text register, sign up for another exhibition. So you can sign up for more than one at any given time. If one has a 3-hour wait and one has a 15-minute wait, why not sign up for both? You'll be able to get yourself in line earlier. And then you can text status at any time, and you'll basically get a repeat of this message letting you know what your current wait is. And it'll show, all of the exhibitions you're registered for if you're registered for more than one. So that's basically what this looks like.
I love it. It's great. It has so many applications. Apart from addressing the immediate need with COVID, I really love it. And maybe this is the future of, and maybe it already is before COVID, of restaurants as well, right? Remember? It feels very much like that. Feels like so long ago, but remember those things they used to give you to sort of take away and
little vibrating.
Yeah, vibrating things. Yeah, it feels like this would solve that problem as well. Exactly. Not that we're here to talk about restaurants, but I can imagine all the kinds of applications. I don't know about the Detroit Institute of Art, but I know that other museums that have restaurants and things like, so it's not just exhibitions, but also those kinds of things can be really helpful in. And it obviously drives a better visitor experience as well. So the less time you're spending around, standing around in lines, and you've got good visibility as to, I think that's what visitors are always looking for, is like good visibility as to where you need to be when, and so that you're not wasting time in your experience, and obviously good all around. I love this. This is great. Well, hopefully in the Q&A we'll get to some questions on the architecture. Sorry, Richard, go on.
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned restaurants. We have Cafe DIA and Kresge Court at the DIA. Both are restaurants that are not open currently. But when they do open, absolutely. I mean, we should just be able to treat them as an exhibition, right? And it would work the same way for the restaurants, because I'm sure that they're going to, when we reopen them, they'll be open with limited capacity in both cases, right? So.
Yeah. So this is great. Time is getting away from us, so I want to move on to our final topic, and then we'll have Q&A, which is all around Microsoft 365. And so, Richard, can we talk about what you've done at the DIA with Microsoft 365?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. So I'll kick us off, and then I'm going to hand it over to Ryan to talk about this a little bit, because COVID changed our timeline a little bit from an execution perspective, but so a good portion of the work that I think Ryan's going to be talking about actually happened pre-COVID, and we're just getting back into the actual implementation right now. But we were at a situation where a fair amount of people at the DIA were already successfully using Microsoft 365, specifically SharePoint and OneDrive, but we didn't really have the kind of adoption that we wanted nor needed. So we recognized that we needed to go through a project to reintroduce, if you will, Microsoft 365 and all the benefits of Microsoft 365 to the entire staff. But we wanted to do it right, and we wanted to make sure that staff bought in, right? Because the only way you're going to get adoption is if staff buy into it through the process. So we approached Red Level and kind of described the problem that we were in and what we wanted to do, and we engaged with them, and Ryan specifically worked through this. And I just have to say, before you get started, Ryan, that the whole experience was awesome. So we're in a very good place after we went through the process that Ryan's going to describe. I just wanted to get that out.
Okay, great. Well, I can't wait to hear from Ryan. So maybe we'll, Ryan, do you want to sort of walk us through
sure.
how you worked with DIA? Yeah.
Yeah. Can you, and Christy, you're on the slide, just go to the next slide. So you bought something thinking you're going to use it and then never actually use it, and it becomes this thing you collect over time. Right. So that's the way we didn't want this technology to be. We didn't want it to be like, hey, I bought this exercise equipment, or I bought this thing. It just becomes kind of like a collection of hobbies. So like Richard said, it was super important that we have this great shiny new technology. We see its uses, but if the users don't see its uses, it just becomes useless. Okay, so that was the antithesis of our whole project. All right, can you go to the next slide? All right, so we did a little bit of background, like Richard said. SharePoint was deployed in 2014. We did the DIA did a survey results, say, hey, how are things going? They put together a task force to kind of say, hey, we have this problem. We really need to increase our training needs. So they really did a great job of systematically, not just, hey, I think we need adoption help. They really went scientifically and produced evidence. Right, and I really love that. And a lot of times organizations, they will ignore these needs, just roll it out. I'm sure it'll be fine, right? I'm sure that whoever the early adopters, people who are interested in technology, they'll spin up enough excitement and it'll take off like a social media platform. That is not how it works. So that's where I kind of came in, is after this results was done. Okay, next slide. All right, so then we got into, okay, so how are we going to do this? Okay, how are we going to take a smack at this guy? And we said we want to roll out, almost like reintroduce some of these tools, but we want to have the greatest impact. Okay, and so what does that look like for the DIA specifically? Okay, and that's the key. Like, if you talk to other technology consultants, like, yeah, we do adoptions, we do rollouts, we do training, but it's very vanilla. It's very it's the exact same formula or recipe. And what we've noticed with with the DIA is like, they're not like other organizations. They're not like the business field. They are they're curators. They're overly curious. There's a creative bent to most people that work there. There's it's not the normal business user. So we said, well, we need to hear from them. We need to hear from them. Like, what are they struggling with, and how can we best serve them and give them technology that's appropriate to solve their particular problems. So for me, I looked at it from, wow, this is a unique scenario comparatively, like working with a bank or working with like a accounting firm or an automotive or a manufacturing kind of sector domain. We realize that this is not like those, okay? And we have to handle them, treat them differently. Next slide, please. All right, so here's what we came up with. So we decided, hey, we need to come up with like, what are the overarching kind of like guidelines of how this technology should work inside the museum? Okay, number two, all right, let's come up with some interviews. And we kind of did these two, number one, number two, in parallel, because we wanted to feed from the interviews and have that impact what our policies were. All right, come up with a proposal, and then do a file migration, get content into these different technology spaces so people can start living the dream. All right. So I know that just bear with me. I'm a little overexcited about technology every now and then. Okay. So that was our big picture plan. All right. Next slide. So let's break this down. So what is governance? What did it look like for us? Okay. Yep. Next slide. Okay, so for governance, what we did is we put together a team of about 10 people, and they're from different areas, okay, or the organization, okay? They were not just IT people, they're folks from curation, development, from the facilities management, because each one would represent their kind of view of how they deal with content. And I was like, I don't know the answers to this. And it was really interesting to hear, and we did a lot of listening, like, okay, so tell me about what you do. What's your problem? What do you think? And okay, and we need you to represent your organization, and we're going to start coming up with some of these ideas. All right, now here's how we did this. Because we're dealing with folks that are running a catering business inside the museum. We have folks that are running the security. They're not technology specialists. So number one thing we had to do is give them a little education. So we got in a room, hands-on. So, okay, here's what Microsoft Teams does. Here's the default recipe of how Microsoft represents how are you going to use Teams. This is what SharePoint is best used for, Yammer, blah, blah, blah. We kind of laid out all of the offerings, like sampling at a buffet, okay? And then we said, okay, what do you think about them? And how do you think these could align to your strategies and different problems? And so that was really kind of one of the responsibilities. Give them some education, start aligning. And this wasn't just in one meeting. This was a series of meetings over a span of like, I think 2 months. And the time, I think, is really important because I need time to think about it. I need time to try it on my own, right? And that doesn't happen in a span of a week. We have other responsibilities. So we scheduled, I think it was like once a week, okay, or every 2 weeks. We'd come back and continue the conversation, and we just push the needle a little further, a little further, a little further, a little further, a little further. And that continuity kind of built this large momentum for our governance team. So that was stage one. Hey, how can we come up with a plan that could work for us? Next slide. The other part that we did in parallel is we started interviewing the different areas of the museum, and each one of the governance folks, they brought their team in, and they were kind of like with me, and we're like listening to them. And part of it is we would introduce, like, here's what Microsoft, here's kind of what we call the default recipe of how to use these tools. What do you think? And what are your problems? What are you doing? And so this is what I was saying before. We did a lot of listening. We did divisions and departments, 12 different ones. We had 7 different sessions. There's a span of about 80 different people, and they were recorded. We consolidated it. Next slide. So what was kind of the outcomes? Okay, and this is the number of people from the different areas. Next slide. And these were what surfaced, okay? And I love this, to go searching time is lengthy, all right? Everybody can identify with that. Document management has mixed practices and skills, which means someone uses this naming convention here, someone uses this naming convention there, they use this folder structure, then also it applies to what tools do they use, right? For example, one organization, they stored a lot of things in the context of like a shared email box. Another organization heavily leveraged OneDrive, and then another one used a SharePoint site, okay? And there was another group that was very progressive, the security team. They're like, we're ready to transition to Teams, we're done. Do you need me here anymore? I'm like, okay. they just went. We're doing this. And they just went and they tried it and experimented. So that was really, really kind of fun. So that was number 2. Number 3 was interdivision isolation awareness. The right hand, and this is actually common of just general public businesses also. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And if one area of the organization is having a win, okay, it'd be great to know about that from the other way, for the other side of the business. And it's funny because usually this has happened through like newsletters, all company all hands staff meetings, quarterly meetings, that kind of stuff. But there was still, even with all those efforts, there was still this like, I don't know enough about the awesome things my organization is doing, right? I don't know about I'm not getting enough feed about what the volunteer community is doing. Right? That was one thing that came up. I want to know more about what are the events that are going on there. You know, everyone is an expert in one little isolated area, but how do I get just generally made aware of all the things that are there? Right? And then lastly was mixed communication tools and methods. I had one organization, they text messaged it all the time. Okay? And there's another group that strictly only used email, another group that used a chat message like Slack. Right? So they had these mixed communication modes. And so one group had a difficult time communicating with another. And this is where like the power of agreement, like we disagree. I don't care what the tool is. Just pick one, right? That you think it would work really good for you. Then you'll have you'll have moved the needle and you'll solve some of those like, let's get on the same channel problems. So there was like we documented maybe like 75 unique concerns. They kind of rolled into these 4, okay? And we thought, all right, now the governance team, how can we wrap this up? All right, next slide. This was kind of the overarching recipe that we came up with, okay? That we would use a SharePoint online for like an intranet for news and company culture, right? How do we get informed about what's going on left and right? Okay, then we said communication and file storage would be Microsoft Teams, all right? And that's our messaging platform, our day-to-day kind of communication platform. And then OneDrive would be used for like personal file storage. So this is the recipe they kind of came up with. And I do a lot of governance things with a lot of organizations, and they change this recipe around a little bit that fits their needs. Some organizations decide to implement Yammer, not Yammer. They decide to use shifts or use Teams for, not have a SharePoint-based instrument. They decide to use Teams for everything. And I'm like, guess what? There's no wrong answer, right? It is this great preference thing, but with all that preference, it becomes a little scary, okay? And that's why we've been really helpful in guiding folks kind of, well, okay, you can do that, but that's kind of like, that'll lead you to this. Like, oh yeah, that's not what we want. Okay, well, let's go back this way. So I feel as though I'm a kind of the parental, I don't know if the parent's the right word, but just guiding and projecting, hey, here's what this could look like. Are you sure that's what you'd like? Yes, awesome. I think I can see how that would be the case. So that was the recipe. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so some of the more particular arrangements that we came up with like just agreements about how we store things. Both these are shelves, agreed? Okay, but now let's decide what goes on each shelf. Books go in the bookshelf, shoes go on the shoe shelf. We don't put books on the shoe shelf, and vice versa. But that was just let's just all come up with an idea. Where do we keep my content? Where do I keep my files? Do I keep them in Teams? Do I keep them in SharePoint? Do I keep them in my OneDrive? Like, what is the universal opinion about how that would work? And we came up with a great strategy that people said, oh, that makes sense. I can understand where that can go. And for me, the key is this: it's got to be like a 3-second rule. If people have a document and they don't know where to put it in 3 seconds, then they'll invent a place to put it. And invention within library systems is the problem. We need consistency, and we need accuracy, and we need things to line up where they need to go. We don't want some kid to go say, look, I invented a new system of organizing the books. All the red ones together, all the green ones are together, and the books together. That breaks any kind of organizational system. So we don't want creativity. It has to be easily understood. So that was one of the byproducts. Next slide. Another byproduct was this. Okay. We defined a tool purpose. So we will use, this is just an example. The goal is use Teams for department collaboration, cross-functional, one-on-one chat, blah, 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 blah. And then we also mapped it to the underlying problems that were discovered during the interviews. Okay, so if you look at the addressing problems, these were exact specific things people were said during the interview process. So, and here's why I do this. Whenever you decide we're going to move forward, you will immediately get challenged. Okay, because change is stressful, even if it's positive change, right? And we're already kind of in a pandemic state here, so we're kind of at our limit of stress, right? So we have to massively justify it and be able to defend it. Okay, so that's what you see here is a defense of change. All right. Well, you guys said these are your issues. We decided, hey, this tool can help you in this way. And they, oh, you're right. Oh, yeah, I see it. It's clear to me now, right? So we have to defend what that looks like. Next slide. We also looked at an approach for how we're going to deal with external guests. So this was a very common scenarios. How do we deal with people outside of our tenant, okay, and outside the museum? So they have a whole bunch of auxiliary groups and vendors and community groups. How we're going to send email, we're going to share documents with OneDrive. They decided, hey, let's use Teams for that. So a little insight to the recipe. Let's use Teams. Create a new team and invite those external people using a Gmail account, and let's collaborate with them through Teams, and let's make them feel like part of the organization. Because listen, they're volunteering their time. They believe the same things we believe, that this mission of the museum is awesome, important, and impacting lives. How can we help them feel more a part of it? Next slide. We also came with a strategy of how to connect all the storage around exhibitions. That's kind of like a main kind of recurring kind of project. Okay, so came up with a nice architecture for that. Next slide. Defined a champions program. Okay, who in the museum would be most interested in helping other people out, right? There's a lot of personality traits here, people that are interested, local subject matter expert, and because IT, there's only so many of us, right? But if we can have kind of local propaganda folks, okay, beating the drum, then that can help out. And also just answer basic, simple questions, right? So those are kind of the folks as we're thinking about rolling it out, let's target them first. Next slide. We came up with a great training program. Next slide. All right, and now it's a matter, like Richard said, we did all this great planning. The pandemic hit, and so now we're kind of picking things back up, and now we're actually starting to move the content and start seeing this as a reality. So our next steps here we've been working on lately is coming up with a retention process. Okay, so museums, we like to hold on to things. Okay, that's our nature. Find historical context and hold on to it and find value, but not everything is historical. So we're coming up with a review process to dispose of content and allow our research library and archivists to have a review, an insight of it, and says, okay, this document's sitting around for 10 years. Now, hey, does this have historical significance? Let's put it in our historical place. We're doing a migration map, we're building that out, and then we'll be ready for our big move. So 2021 is going to be a great year. And so this is this part of my presentation here, guys, I'm showing you, hey, there's a lot of new technology, but unless you find like a good use for the tools, you just they're just being collections, like tools in your garage you never use, okay? A bike that you never ride, okay? And so we found that helping an organization realize its use and its application is important, because we don't necessarily are always innovating in that space. Oh, what tool could I use to help my job next? No, we're pretty busy getting stuff done, right? We don't always take the time for innovation. So we found it, like Richard said, it was a lot of fun, and we just never know from group to group, museum to museum, what recipe is going to work for you. So that's going to close up mine. Let's open it up to Q&A and about any of the 3 different parts. And
great. Well, thanks so much, Brian. That's great. I think you're going down the right track with this idea of, what problem are you trying to solve, rather than, here's all the features that are available, use them, right? And I think that that's so important, because technology is about enabling doing something. It's not about, so I really love this approach. Richard, maybe we've got a few minutes for questions, but maybe we can just quickly ask you, has that been a successful approach so far at DIA in terms of starting with what the problem is?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, we've got quite a few people already engaged, and frankly, people clamoring for us to move forward, right? So it's not going to be, a situation where we have to drag people along. People are anxious and, okay, so when do we go? Let's go, right? So yeah. It's that has been refreshing, right?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Let's take some questions in our last few minutes. So we had a question here, which is about the queue management app, and it was, how does a user find an open time in the queue management app? And maybe that's not how it works, but you're the expert, so maybe Richard, you or someone from Red Level could talk about that.
Yeah, so it's really not about finding a time. It's just like walking up and getting into a line, right? So the process when you register is you actually walking up and standing in the line. So you're next in line at that point. So there's really not a time slot that you're fitting into. Okay. You're just getting in line. Maybe
maybe you haven't experienced this yet, where the demand is greater than the available capacity, substantial. So maybe then the answer is like 3 hours, like.
Right. So there's 2 different things. So when you register, you get in line. At that point, we tell you about how long it will be before you'll be able to enter. So that could be, half hour, an hour, however long, based on the number of people already in line ahead of you and the cadence of every 5 minutes we let the next group in. We can calculate how long approximately it'll be before you're able to be let in, and we'll just keep reminding you how long that is.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And we have another question, which is maybe a little technical, which is like, what is the SMS component that you referenced today around this texting idea?
What is it? I mean, what's the technology we used? I think that it sounds like that's the nature of the question, right? It's Twilio, right? Clay?
Yep. We're using the Twilio platform, so we're integrating with that, using their web hooks. So we've got, the process is hosted in Azure, and then Twilio, whenever you text that number, is going to hit a webhook in Azure to trigger the SMS messages.
Okay,
response.
Great. Just in our last minute, wow, time flew, didn't it? In our last minute, we don't have any other questions, but if people have them, then pop them in the chat really quickly, and we'll see if we can get them addressed. But maybe I could sort of, while we're doing that, just sort of make some comments around. My role here at Microsoft is to look at solutions for museums and libraries globally. And what I really love about Red Level is how they've really, worked with the museum industry and understood it, and really thought about what's the best way to work with them, to work with this industry to achieve results. And that's what we've been talking about today. But I also think that. And I know that I'm biased here, I think the Microsoft technology stack becomes building blocks. We very much see it as foundational technology that allows you to put together these sort of solutions quickly. So I don't know whether the guys from Red Level want to comment on that, because I know you've talked about a number of different Microsoft solutions here.
Yeah, we're utilizing, SharePoint, Azure, Power Automate, and bringing all that together, so the queue management app is using Azure and SQL Azure database, and the touchless response stations is using SharePoint as its backend data, Power Automate for the approval workflow, to OK messages to be shown on the website that is hosted in Azure.
Yep, great.
And forms.
And
And
forms.
subforms.
Yep.
I think people don't realize how much technology Microsoft has. It's a very consumer facing, but there's so much more. We have some questions here around what sort of investment levels should organizations think about with some of these solutions?
Yeah, so from a museum perspective, right, first of all, Microsoft is very kind to nonprofit organizations. So that's why we try to leverage Microsoft, the tool set that we already have as much as possible. And I can't speak to the costs associated with each of the solutions that we've talked about here. That'd be something that Red Level would have to speak to. But for us, it was quite, to me, for the museum, which is very cost conscious, I felt it was quite reasonable for us.
So accessible. Yeah, I think the person who asked the question, maybe Red Level can follow up with them. But I think, that's certainly the philosophy all around is about, how can we make these technologies accessible and scalable? Great. Yep. So I think we're well and truly, we're actually past time now. Wow, that went incredibly fast. Thank you so much. This is great. I really love what you guys have partnered together on here and look forward to seeing what you do more of. So Megan, should we come back to you or otherwise, thank you.
So again, thank you to everybody for joining us. We had a few other offline questions that we will follow up with directly. So I hope everybody has a fabulous rest of your day and we will be in touch soon. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.